Hello lovely people! As we know, I spend a vast majority of my time perusing secondhand bookshops, and as a result I have sort of collated quite an interesting collection of secondhand books at the moment. 2016 I set myself the goal to read more non-fiction, and I did, and I've been really enjoying it, so I thought continue it onwards into 2017. So these are just some interesting things that I have stumbled my way upon that I am planning on reading this year.
Doobie 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 doo. Doobie 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 Sophie Vlogs.
First up we have quite a small book, and that is A Card from Angela Carter by Susanna Clapp. Angela Carter obviously is a author well known for her anthology The Bloody Chamber, amongst other novels as well. This is a collection of postcards and stuff that she sent Susanna Clarke because they were friends. I gather they corresponded. So it's sort of just like a glimpse into her life. In a weird twist of coincidence, I picked this up for £2 in a charity shop when I was on my way to the Royal West of England Academy / the RWA, because they had an exhibition on that's all about Angela Carter. That's about, it was really interesting actually. It was, firstly, you looked at pieces which were directly inspired by her books, so pieces artists have created based on her work, and then you saw artwork which is art that is either mentioned in her books or is similar to themes that run through her books. And then the final bit was you saw like the actual art of her books, so the book covers. There was also people who were studying there did like a book cover challenge. It ended in a really weird little room full of these like giant people with really creepy faces, and it was really dark, and there was like a screaming man on a table. It was very weird. Like, I know Angela Carter's stuff gets a bit dark and stuff, but that final room, I just walked in and I was like, I don't like this. So I've had like mixed experiences with Angela Carter. I really liked The Bloody Chamber. I felt like I just didn't get The Passion of New Eve. I have, I think it's The Magic Toy Shop I have, or Nights at the Circus, I can't remember. I have a brain of a sieve sometimes. I have another one of her novels because I am going to like persevere, because I think I can get her if I just keep going. Like, we're partly there. I don't know if we're ever going to be like bosom friends, but like, I'm going to keep going. So this should be really interesting, just get like a little insight into what she was like as a person. So yeah, really excited for this. Next up we have Wild Swans, Three Daughters of China by Yung Chang. I have heard really good things about this. Someone somewhere on BookTube once raved about it, and I lodged it in my little brain banks. I forgot to lodge who talked about it, but I remembered this, and I remembered that it was really, really good. So from my understanding, it talks about the life of her grandmother, the life of her mother, and then her own autobiography, about their lives in China. I will confess, I don't know a lot about China, just like in general. Not a country I know a lot about. Part of my reason why I want to keep driving myself to read non-fiction is to keep educating myself on stuff that I know nothing about. So China's not a place I know a lot about. Hoping this is going to change it. Heard super great things about it. Excited to check it out. The third book I picked up is Fashioning the Feminine, Representation and Women's Fashion from the Findusy Clay to the Present by Cheryl Buckley and Hilary Fawcett. This is essentially looking at how ideas of femininity have influenced fashion. That's my understanding. It was published in 2002, so it may well be a little bit outdated by now, or rather not outdated, but like, I'm going to try and consume it with the knowledge that it's not entirely up to date necessarily. So I really like fashion, I find it really interesting, I like looking at fashion, but I feel like I am lacking in the knowledge of fashion. This is such a rambling. What I'm trying to say is, I'm not particularly fashionable, but I find fashion interesting. I really like reading into the social history of fashion and reasonings behind popularities and trends and stuff like this. So I just thought I would pick it up, dip my toe in, read some like fashion theory, see how I get on with it. If you are someone who is really into fashion theory and has other recommendations that you think I might like, or that's like a good place to start, please do let me know, because I'm fairly new to these waters and I'm sort of just like throwing myself in blindly. After that, I continue my obsession with the Pre-Raphaelites with Hall Caine's Recollections of Rossetti. This was written during the last couple of months of Rossetti's life. This was after he famously, like, exhumed the body of Lizzie Sedal to, like, grab his poems back out of it, and then was obviously like, oh, people have judged me for this, and then was just going through, like, a really bad time in his mental state, and was probably quite depressed and stuff like that. So this is Hall Caine's, like, account of that time and the time he spent with him, because he went and, just talked to him a lot about his life, that sort of a thing. Rossetti is probably my favourite pre-Raphaelite just in a visual sense, although I think he was probably a bit of a dick. But I know a lot more about the lives of William Morris and Burne-Jones because I've read more actual, like, biographies and stuff on them. So I figure it's about time I did the same for Rossetti, and especially because this is like a contemporary account rather than like a modern look back at the lives of them, I think it should be quite interesting. I'm just excited to learn a bit more about it, get a better sense of Rossetti as a person, and that sort of thing. Also, like, beautiful, beautiful. Oh, isn't he such a wonderful painter? Yes. Number potentially 5 is Blue Nights by Joan Didion. Joan Didion is someone who I have heard a lot about, I've only read a little of. I did a module on essays in university, and I had to write an essay on essays. So Joan Didion was like a little bright spark in the midst of dryness. So I've always meant to just like pick up a book of hers and read it. It's written in the wake of the death of her daughter, and sort of just her thoughts and exploration of how she's feeling and all that sort of thing. So I feel like it's probably going to be quite hard hitting. I think it's probably going to be quite an emotional read. I don't really know anything more than that. I'm just sort of going to read it and see what I can take from it and just sort of see how it goes. Next up we have Queer Identities and Politics in Germany, A History 1880 to 1945 by Clayton J. Wisnant. I sort of just thought that this sounded really interesting. As I've mentioned before on this channel, I'm bisexual. I like to read about the history of like the LGBT plus community. I sort of want to always be educating myself on the history of this community. I think it's quite easy for it to seem like there is no history because maybe there weren't the dominant voices, but it is still there. From what I know, there was actually quite a large and thriving LGBT community in Germany, but then obviously with the rise of the Nazi Party, so did the rise of their persecution begin. So I think this is going to educate me a lot more on that. I think it is going to be a history that is probably going to be quite hard to read, but I think it's necessary to read. So I'm going to explore this at some point. I've lost count of what number I'm on. This is quite a big haul, but after that we've got Goddesses, Whores, Wives and Slaves, Women in Classical Antiquity by Sarah B. Pomeroy. When I did classical studies, I did a module on gender and sexuality in the ancient world, and this was a very useful book to have. So I've definitely used some of the chapters in essays that I've written before. I spotted it at a bookshop. It was one of like the core texts that I did refer to a lot, so I thought if I have it, that's really useful. I know I haven't read it all the way through. I know there's still lots to be gained out of it. I know Sarah B. Pomeroy is like quite a good established name in the classical studies world. Always looking to keep learning. That's like the underlying point of this video, is I'm like, I just want to learn all the things. So I thought, time to pick it back up, dip my toe back in those waters, and just see what I've forgotten, see what I never knew, and yes. After that, I also picked up Blue Stockings, The Remarkable Story of the First Women to Fight for an Education by Jane Robinson. I was initially confused because this looked like it was a fiction book, but from flicking through it and from like reading like a little bit of it, it's actually a non-fiction book, but I think it draws a lot heavily on like primary sources of the time, so that's whether that's like women's diaries, women's letters, that sort of thing. Obviously there are lots of different things that women have had to fight to be able to do throughout time, like vote and stuff. Another example of that is education. You know, women did not used to be able to go to university, that sort of thing, and this tells the story of some of the people who were key in fighting to change that, and to allow women to be able to go to university, and to study, and to have an education, and to prove that it was scientifically possible for women to have an education, and they were capable of learning. Which seems ridiculous now, but at the time apparently needed doing. This should be interesting. I am aware that early suffragist movements, whilst great, because yay for all of that, also had some biases in regards to like class and race and stuff like that. Don't know if this book is going to touch on that. I'm going to try and keep it in mind whilst I'm reading it, but nonetheless, I am still excited to read about some awesome accomplishments from some awesome women. Finally, the last book I'm going to talk about is Ancient Land, Sacred Whale, The Inuit Hunt and Its Rituals by Tom Lowenstein. This tells the story of Lowenstein's time with the Tikigak tribe. I'm very sorry if I'm not saying that right. They are the longest continuously settled tribe, and they're based in, I think, Point Hope, Alaska. This is sort of a mixture of anthropology and poetry. I've included it in the non-fiction because he spent a lot of time with the tribe. The whale hunt is like a specific time period in each year. He spent, I think, over a year with them, so he sort of experienced what life is like all year round. And so this is like a combination of like anthropology, so like learning about the history of these peoples and what they do, and also poetry, because I think he's taken his experiences and sort of interpreted it into poetry and written it down through poetry. It's just another example of some peoples whose history I am not familiar with at all, that I would like to learn more about and hopefully become more educated on. So when I saw this, I thought I had to get it. I think the essential message of this video is that non-fiction is really great because it helps you continue to engage and learn about things that you would otherwise not know anything about. So I'm really excited to have found all of these. I feel like I've got quite a broad range of stuff, which is good. If you have any recommendations for me based off of these, please do let me know. I am kind of like buying non-fiction books at a higher rate than I'm reading them because I'm just too excited about the concept that I might learn these things. I need to like really work on actually like reading them. I hope you vaguely enjoyed this rambly mess of a video. I hope everything is fantastic with you. I hope you're reading lots and lots of lovely things and maybe some non-fiction too. Have yourself a fantastic day and I will see you next week.